The January wind cut through cold waterfalls like a knife through butter, carrying with it the smell of snow and wood smoke. Elias Mercer stood outside the general store, hat pulled low, collar up, trying to look like he wasn't waiting for anything in particular. But everyone in town knew what day it was. Hell, they'd been talking about nothing else for weeks. The confirmed bachelor was finally getting himself a wife. "She'll be here any minute now," Martha Henley said from the store's doorway, her voice dripping with barely concealed excitement. "Stage is running right on time for once." Elias didn't respond, didn't even look at her, just kept his eyes on the frozen road leading into town, watching for dust that hadn't yet appeared. He was 42 years old and hadn't touched a woman in 8 years. Not since Caroline died. Not since the influenza took her and their unborn child in the same godforsaken week, leaving him alone in that ranch house with nothing but silence and guilt for company. His friends had told him to move on. His sister had begged him to try again. Even his ranch hands had started looking at him with pity, which was worse than anything. So 6 months ago, after one too many nights of eating cold beans straight from the can and talking to his horse like it might answer back, Elias had done something he swore he'd never do. He'd written to a mail-order bride agency in Boston. The letter had been brief, businesslike. He needed a wife, someone practical, someone who could cook, clean, help around the ranch. He wasn't looking for love. He'd already had that and lost it. He was looking for a partner, a companion, someone to fill the terrible silence. The agency had written back within a month. They had a candidate. Her name was Rowan Hale, age 31, originally from Philadelphia. She was educated, capable, and willing to relocate to the Wyoming Territory. The letter included a small photograph, though it was so faded and poorly developed that Elias couldn't make out much beyond a dark-haired woman with a serious expression. Good enough. He'd sent the money, signed the papers, made the arrangements. And now, on this frozen January morning, his mail-order bride was about to arrive, and Elias was discovering that his stomach could still tie itself into knots after all these years. "There!" someone shouted. "There it is!" The stagecoach appeared around the bend, horses straining against their harnesses, wheels churning up frozen mud. The driver cracked his whip once, twice, and the whole contraption came rattling into town like a thunderclap. Elias felt every eye in Coldwater Falls turn toward him. He stepped off the boardwalk, boots crunching in the snow, and walked toward the coach as it shuddered to a halt. His heart was pounding harder than it had any right to. This was a business arrangement, nothing more. No reason to be nervous. The driver climbed down, opened the door, and extended his hand. "Careful now, miss. It's slippery." A gloved hand emerged first, then a dark blue traveling dress. Then Elias stopped breathing. The woman who stepped down from that stagecoach was tall, nearly as tall as he was. She wore a heavy wool coat and a hat with a veil that covered the entire right side of her face. But the left side, the visible side, showed a woman with strong features, dark eyes, and a mouth set in a firm line. She looked directly at him, didn't smile, didn't bow her head or act shy, just stood there in the middle of the frozen street, gripping a small traveling case, and stared. "Mr. Mercer?" Her voice was lower than he'd expected, steadier. "That's me." He took a step forward, then stopped. Something was wrong. The veil wasn't just a fashion choice. The way she held herself angled slightly to keep the right side of her face hidden. "I should tell you something before we go any further." Rowan's words came out in puffs of white vapor. "The photograph you received was taken before my accident. I wanted to be honest with you, but the agency thought it would be better to wait until we met in person." Elias felt a cold weight settling in his gut. "What kind of accident?" Instead of answering, Rowan reached up and lifted the veil. The entire town gasped. The right side of her face was a landscape of scar tissue. Burns, by the look of it, deep ones, the kind that twisted skin into something that barely resembled human flesh anymore. It started at her temple, ran down across her cheek and jaw, and disappeared beneath her collar. Her right eye was intact but surrounded by puckered skin. Her mouth pulled slightly to one side. She'd been beautiful once. You could still see traces of it on the left side of her face, but the right side looked like it had been held too close to a fire and melted. Elias couldn't speak, couldn't move. His brain had simply stopped working. Behind him, he heard Martha Henley make a sound somewhere between a gasp and a whimper. Someone else muttered something he couldn't quite make out. The word Lord definitely featured prominently. Rowan stood perfectly still, chin up, eyes locked on his, waiting. I understand if you want to send me back. Her voice didn't waver. The agency will refund your money. I made sure of that before I left Boston. You're not obligated to No. The word came out before Elias could stop it, before he could think about what he was saying. Rowan blinked. No? No. He cleared his throat, tried to find words that didn't sound completely stupid. You came all this way. That doesn't mean you have to keep me. I signed papers. Papers can be torn up. They stared at each other across 3 feet of frozen mud. Around them, the entire town held its breath. Elias looked at her face again, really looked at it this time. The scars were terrible, yes, shocking. But underneath all that twisted skin, he saw something else. Something in her eyes. A kind of fierce pride that refused to be beaten down. She'd gotten on that stagecoach knowing what would happen when she arrived. Knowing he'd see her face, knowing the whole town would stare. And she'd come anyway. That took guts. More guts than he'd shown in 8 years. Welcome home, Mrs. Mercer. The words came out rougher than he'd intended, but Rowan heard them. Her eyes widened slightly, and for just a moment something that might have been relief flickered across her face. Then she lowered the veil, picked up her traveling case, and nodded once. Thank you. The ride back to the ranch took 30 minutes, and neither of them spoke for 29 of them. Elias kept his eyes on the road, hands tight on the reins, trying not to think about what he'd just done. He'd expected practical. He'd expected plain. He hadn't expected that. Beside him, Rowan sat perfectly straight, hands folded in her lap, veil firmly in place. She didn't fidget, didn't try to make small talk, just sat there like a statue while the wagon bounced over frozen ruts. Finally, as they turned onto the long drive leading to the ranch, Elias cleared his throat. The house needs work. I assumed it would. I've been alone for a while. Haven't kept up with things the way I should. I'm not afraid of work, Mr. Mercer. Elias. You can call me Elias. She didn't respond to that. The ranch came into view, a sprawling collection of buildings that had once been well-maintained and was now barely hanging on. The main house needed paint. The barn roof sagged in the middle. Fences were missing boards. Equipment lay scattered where it had been dropped and forgotten. It looked exactly like what it was, a place where a man had stopped caring. Elias pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the house and climbed down. He moved to help Rowan, but she was already on the ground, case in hand, looking at the ranch with an expression he couldn't read. It's larger than I expected, she said. Used to run 200 head of cattle. Now I'm down to about 80. What happened? I got tired. It was the most honest thing he'd said in years. Rowan turned to look at him, and even through the veil he could feel the weight of her gaze. I'm not here to fix you, Mr. Mercer. I'm here because I need a place to live, and you need someone to help run this ranch. That's the arrangement, nothing more. I know. Good. She picked up her case and walked toward the house. Show me where I'll be sleeping. The house was worse than Rowan had imagined. She'd grown up in a proper Philadelphia townhouse with servants and china and furniture that didn't look like it had been assembled by a drunk carpenter. She'd married into money, lived in luxury, had everything a woman could want. Then the fire happened, and now here she was, standing in a Wyoming ranch house that smelled like mildew and old bacon, looking at furniture that should have been burned for kindling years ago. But she didn't complain. Didn't even let herself think about complaining. She'd made her choice. She'd answered that advertisement knowing exactly what kind of life she was signing up for. A practical life. A hard life. A life where nobody would have to look at her face and pretend they weren't disgusted. This is your room. Elias opened a door off the main hallway. I'm at the other end of the house, bathrooms in between. Rowan looked into the room. It was small, barely large enough for the narrow bed and ancient dresser crammed inside. But it had a window, and the bed had a quilt that looked handmade, and honestly, she'd slept in worse places over the past 3 years. It's fine. There's a lock on the door, Elias added quickly. I want you to know that. This is a business arrangement. I don't expect... I understand, Mr. Mercer. Elias. I prefer Mr. Mercer. She said it firmly enough that he didn't argue, just nodded once and backed out of the doorway. I'll heat up some stew for supper. You can come down when you're ready. Then he was gone, and Rowan was alone in her new room, in her new house, in her new life. She set down her traveling case, removed her hat and veil, and caught sight of herself in the small mirror above the dresser. The scars looked worse in the dim light, more twisted, more monstrous. She'd stopped crying about them 2 years ago. Tears didn't change anything, didn't bring back her old face, her old life, her old husband who'd looked at her burns exactly once before walking out and never coming back. This was her face now. These were her scars. And if Elias Mercer could live with them, then she could damn well live with them too. She unpacked her case, changed into a simpler dress, pinned her hair back, and went downstairs to meet her new husband. The stew was terrible, not just bland or underseasoned, actively terrible. Like Elias had thrown random ingredients into a pot and hoped for the best. Rowan ate it anyway. She wasn't about to complain on her first night. They sat at opposite ends of a table that could have seated 8, eating in silence except for the sound of spoons scraping against bowls. The kitchen was cold, the lamp flickered. Somewhere outside, wind rattled the windows. Finally, Elias cleared his throat. "You cook?" "Yes." "Good. Because I can't." "I noticed." Was that almost a smile? Hard to tell with the veil back in place. "I can handle most ranch work," Elias continued. "Cattle, horses, fences, that sort of thing. But the house? I'm not good with the house stuff." "Then it's fortunate you hired someone who is." "I didn't hire you. I married you." "The papers say otherwise." She was right, of course. The marriage certificate had been signed before she even left Boston. Legal, but loveless. Binding, but bloodless. They were technically husband and wife, but they were really employer and employee with extra steps. Elias pushed his bowl away. "Why'd you answer my advertisement?" It was the question he'd been dying to ask since she stepped off that stagecoach. Rowan was quiet for a long moment. Then she set down her spoon and looked at him directly. "Because no one else would have me." The bluntness of it hit him like a slap. "I was married before," she continued, "to a good man from a good family. We had a nice house in Philadelphia. I thought I had a nice life." "What happened?" "There was a fire. A kitchen fire that got out of control. I tried to save—" She stopped, swallowed hard. "It doesn't matter what I tried to save. What matters is that I ended up like this, and my husband couldn't stand to look at me anymore. He divorced me, blamed me for the fire, and made sure everyone in Philadelphia society knew I was damaged goods, unmarriageable, worthless." Elias felt something dark and ugly twist in his chest. "That's practical?" Rowan's voice was sharp. "Honest? That's what men do, Mr. Mercer. They want beautiful wives, perfect wives, wives they can show off at parties and church socials. They don't want wives who make children cry and women faint." "Not all men." "No, not all men. Some men are desperate enough to settle for whatever they can get. That's why I answered your advertisement, because I knew you were desperate, and I was desperate, and sometimes two desperate people can build something functional together." She stood up, collected the bowls, and carried them to the sink. "I'll do the cooking and cleaning. I'll help with the ranch work when you need it. I'll be a good wife in every practical sense. But don't expect me to pretend this is anything other than what it is. A business arrangement between two people who had nowhere else to go." Then she walked out of the kitchen, leaving Elias alone with the guttering lamp and the terrible realization that he'd just married the loneliest woman in the world. Rowan attacked the ranch like it was an enemy that needed defeating. She woke before dawn, cooked proper meals, scrubbed floors that hadn't been scrubbed in years, washed windows, mended curtains, organized the pantry, and somehow still found time to help Elias with the cattle. She didn't complain, didn't ask for help, didn't slow down. It was like watching someone try to outrun their own shadow. "You don't have to do all this," Elias said on the third day, finding her on her knees in the kitchen, scrubbing grout with a brush and a look of grim determination. "Yes, I do." "Why?" She sat back on her heels and looked up at him. The veil was gone. She'd stopped wearing it inside the house after the first day, which Elias appreciated even though the scars still made him flinch when he wasn't expecting them. "Because if I stop working, I'll start thinking, and if I start thinking, I'll remember everything I lost, so I work." She went back to scrubbing. Elias stood there for another moment, wanting to say something comforting, something kind, but all the words felt wrong in his mouth. So he just nodded and went back outside. The ranch hands noticed the changes too. Boss, did you fix the porch? Jim Crawford asked on the fourth day, staring at the front steps that had been sagging for 2 years and were now solid and level. My wife fixed it. Your wife fixed the porch? She's handy. Jim opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. That's real good, boss. What he didn't say, but Elias heard anyway. That's real good for someone who looks like that. The town was worse. Elias had to go into Coldwater Falls on Saturday for supplies, and Rowan insisted on coming with him. She wore the veil in public, but it didn't hide enough. People stared, women whispered behind their hands, children pointed until their mothers slapped their fingers down. At the general store, Martha Henley couldn't stop asking invasive questions. How are you settling in, dear? Fine, thank you. Must be quite an adjustment coming from the city. I manage. And Elias is treating you well? Mr. Mercer is a perfect gentleman. The way Martha's eyes lit up at that told Elias exactly what the town thought, that he was too much of a coward to consummate his own marriage. They weren't wrong. Outside the store, they ran into Victor Crow. Victor owned the largest ranch in the territory, had more money than sense, and had spent the last 5 years trying to buy Elias out. He was tall, handsome, confident, and everything Elias used to be before Caroline died. Well, well, Victor's voice boomed across the street. If it isn't the newlyweds, Mercer, I heard you'd finally found yourself a wife, but I didn't believe it until now. His eyes slid to Rowan, and his expression didn't change, didn't flicker. He just looked at her the way you'd look at a strange dog you weren't sure about. Ma'am, he tipped his hat. Victor Crow, welcome to Coldwater Falls. Mrs. Mercer. Rowan's voice was steady. Mrs. Mercer indeed. Victor smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. You must be quite the remarkable woman to take on that ranch. Elias here has been letting it fall apart for years. I keep offering to buy him out, but he's stubborn. The ranch isn't for sale, Elias said flatly. Everything's for sale, friend. You just haven't hit your price yet. Victor's gaze flicked back to Rowan. Though I suppose now you've got help, things might turn around. If you need anything, Mrs. Mercer, anything at all, you just let me know. I'm always happy to help a neighbor. The offer sounded generous. It felt like an insult. Rowan lifted her chin. That's very kind, Mr. Crow, but we're quite capable of managing on our own. I'm sure you are. Victor's smile widened. I'm sure you are. He walked away, leaving Elias standing there with his fists clenched and his jaw tight. I hate that man, he muttered. He's just a bully, Rowan said quietly. Bullies lose interest when you don't give them what they want. And what does he want? To see you fail. She was right. She was absolutely right. And that made Elias hate Victor Crow even more. The blizzard hit on the 10th day. It came out of nowhere. 1 minute the sky was clear, the next it was white and howling and impossible to see through. Elias was out checking the cattle when it struck, and by the time he made it back to the house, he was half frozen and completely blind. Rowan pulled him inside, stripped off his wet coat, and shoved him toward the fireplace. You could have died out there. Cattle needed checking. The cattle are fine. You're an idiot. She wrapped him in blankets, made hot coffee, and sat beside him while the storm raged outside. The wind howled, the windows rattled. Snow piled up against the doors. They were trapped. For 3 days, they were trapped together in that house with nothing to do but talk. At first, they didn't. They just sat in separate rooms, reading or working or staring at the walls. But by the second day, the silence became unbearable. Tell me about your wife. Rowan's voice came from across the room, where she sat mending one of his shirts. Elias looked up from the book he wasn't actually reading. Why? Because she's in this house with us. Her ghost. I can feel it everywhere. In the bedroom you won't use. In the kitchen you won't enter. In every corner where you look like you're seeing something I can't see. She wasn't wrong. Elias closed the book. Her name was Caroline. We got married young. I was 22, she was 19. Everyone said we were too young, but we didn't care. We were in love, stupid, blind, happy love. What was she like? Beautiful, kind, patient, everything I wasn't. He stared into the fire. She wanted children. I wanted to build the ranch. We fought about it sometimes, but not seriously. We had time. Or so I thought. What happened? Influenza. Swept through town 8 years ago. Caroline caught it and his voice cracked. She was pregnant, 6 months along. I didn't even know she wasn't feeling well until she collapsed in the kitchen. By the time I got her to the doctor, it was too late. She died 3 days later. The baby died with her. Rowan's hands had stopped moving. I'm sorry. Everyone's sorry. Sorry doesn't change anything. No, it doesn't. They sat in silence for a while. The fire crackled. The storm howled. Then Rowan spoke again. Her name was Sarah. She was 6 years old. Elias looked at her. My daughter, Rowan continued, her voice flat and distant. The fire that burned me, I was trying to get her out. The kitchen was already engulfed. I could hear her screaming upstairs. I ran in, got to her room, grabbed her, tried to get back down the stairs. But the floor gave way. She touched the scars on her face. I woke up in a hospital 2 weeks later. My face was bandaged, my husband was gone, and Sarah, her voice broke. Sarah didn't make it. Elias felt like he'd been punched in the chest. Rowan, everyone told me it wasn't my fault. The fire was an accident. The house was old, the wiring was bad. But it doesn't matter whose fault it was. She's dead. My daughter is dead, and I'm alive, and I have to live with that every single day. She stood up abruptly, dropping the shirt. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have. I need to. She walked out of the room before Elias could stop her. He sat there staring at the empty doorway, understanding for the first time that he wasn't the only one in this house haunted by ghosts. When the blizzard finally broke, something between them had shifted. Not love, not even friendship, but understanding, recognition. Two people who'd lost everything, standing in the wreckage of their lives and realizing they weren't alone anymore. Elias started talking more. Not about anything important, just small things. The weather, the cattle, plans for the spring. But he talked, and Rowan listened, and slowly the terrible silence in the house began to lift. Rowan stopped working herself into exhaustion. She still cooked and cleaned and helped with the ranch, but she took breaks, sat down sometimes, let herself rest. They ate meals together, drank coffee in the mornings, sat by the fire in the evenings. It almost felt normal. Then one night, 3 weeks after Rowan's arrival, Elias came inside to find her standing in front of the bedroom that used to belong to him and Caroline. The door was open. She was just standing there, staring inside. I can clean this room if you want, she said quietly. Pack up her things, make it into something else. No. Elias, I said no. He walked past her, shut the door firmly, and went to his own room at the other end of the house. Rowan stood there for a long moment. Then she turned and went downstairs without a word. That night, Elias lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, hating himself. He was falling for her, not the way he'd fallen for Caroline. That had been easy and light and full of laughter. This was different, harder, like trying to walk with broken legs. He saw the way Rowan worked the ranch with determination that never quit, the way she handled the town's cruelty with her head held high, the way she'd looked at him during the storm when he'd told her about Caroline, like she understood exactly what it felt like to lose everything. She was strong, fierce, brave in ways he'd never been, and he was terrified. Terrified that if he let himself love her, he'd lose her too. Terrified that this practical arrangement would turn into something real and painful and unbearable when it inevitably fell apart. So he did what he did best. He pulled away. Over the next 2 weeks, Elias rebuilt the walls between them brick by brick. He stopped eating breakfast with Rowan, started taking his meals outside with the ranch hands. He stopped talking to her about anything that mattered. He started finding excuses to stay away from the house, fixing fences that didn't need fixing, checking cattle that didn't need checking, riding into town for supplies they already had. Rowan noticed. Of course she noticed. But she didn't say anything, just kept cooking his meals, keeping his house, living her half-life as Mrs. Mercer, in name only. Until the day she found him in the barn, staring at an old photograph of Caroline. You should move on. Her voice came from behind him, making him jump. Elias shoved the photograph back into his pocket. That's none of your business. It is when it's destroying both of us. I'm not destroying Yes, you are. She moved closer, and he could see the anger in her eyes. You're killing yourself trying to hold on to something that's gone, and you're killing me in the process. I never asked you to. You asked me to be your wife. You stood in that street and said, 'Welcome home, Mrs. Mercer,' in front of the whole town. You made me believe this could be something real. And now you're acting like I'm some kind of burden you're stuck with. That's not... Then what is it, Elias? Because I can't keep doing this. I can't keep living in a house full of ghosts, working myself to death for a man who won't even look at me. I look at you. No, you don't. You look past me, through me, at Caroline's ghost standing where I'm supposed to be. She was right. She was absolutely right, and he hated her for it. Maybe this was a mistake, he said. The words came out before he could stop them. Rowan went very still. What? This. Us. Maybe I wasn't ready. Maybe I'll never be ready. She stared at him for a long moment. Then she turned and walked out of the barn without another word. Elias stood there in the dim light, surrounded by tools and hay and the ghosts of better men, and wondered how he'd managed to destroy the best thing in his life in less than 4 weeks. That night, Rowan packed her bag. She did it quietly, methodically, folding her dresses and tucking away her few belongings with the same grim efficiency she brought to everything else. She'd been foolish to think this could work. Foolish to believe that a scarred woman and a broken man could build something functional together. He didn't want a wife. He wanted a housekeeper who wouldn't ask questions. And she'd been desperate enough to pretend that was enough. But it wasn't enough. Not anymore. She left before dawn while Elias was still asleep, walked the 3 miles into Coldwater Falls carrying her traveling case and wearing her veil. The sun was just starting to rise when she reached the town, painting the frozen street in shades of gold and pink. She went to the hotel, rented a room, and sat on the narrow bed wondering what the hell she was supposed to do now. She had no money. Elias had paid for everything. No connections in Wyoming, nowhere to go back to in Philadelphia. She'd bet everything on this marriage working, and she'd lost. Elias woke to silence. Not the usual silence, the one filled with the sound of Rowan moving around the kitchen, cooking breakfast, humming softly to herself. This was different, heavier, like the house itself had stopped breathing. He got dressed, went downstairs, and found the kitchen empty. No coffee brewing, no bacon sizzling, no Rowan. Her bedroom door stood open, the bed was made, her belongings were gone. Elias stood in the doorway, staring at the empty room, and felt something cold and sharp lodge itself in his chest. She'd left. She'd actually left. He spent the rest of the day searching for her, rode into town, checked the general store, the hotel, the church, asked everyone he saw if they'd seen his wife. Some people looked sympathetic, others looked smug. Victor Crow just smiled and said, "Guess she finally came to her senses, eh?" Elias wanted to hit him, wanted to smash that smug face into the frozen ground and keep hitting until his knuckles broke. Instead, he turned and walked away. He found her at the hotel. The clerk confirmed she'd rented a room that morning. Elias stood outside her door for 10 minutes, trying to find the courage to knock. Finally, he did. Rowan opened the door, and for a moment they just stared at each other. She looked tired, sad, but not broken. Never broken. "What do you want, Mr. Mercer?" "To talk. I think you said everything you needed to say." "I was wrong." "Yes, you were." She started to close the door. "Wait." He put his hand on the door frame. "Please, just give me 5 minutes." "Why should I?" "Because I'm an idiot and a coward, and you deserve better than this, but I'm asking you to come back anyway." Rowan stared at him. Then slowly she opened the door wider. 5 minutes. They sat in her hotel room, her on the bed, him on the single chair, and for a full minute Elias couldn't find any words. "I loved Caroline," he finally said. "I loved her so much that when she died, I didn't think I'd survive it. I wanted to die too. For years I wanted to die, but I was too much of a coward to actually do it, so I just stopped living instead." Rowan listened without speaking. "Then you showed up, and at first I thought it would be easy, practical. We'd help each other, build something functional. That's what you said, right? 2 desperate people building something functional. That's what I said. But it wasn't functional. Not for me." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "You terrified me, Rowan. Not because of your scars. I stopped seeing those after the first week. You terrified me because you made me feel things I thought I'd buried with Caroline. You made me want to live again, And that was the most frightening thing I'd ever experienced. So you pushed me away. I pushed you away. He looked at her directly. I said this was a mistake because I was scared. Not because I believed it, not because I wanted you to leave, but because I'm a coward who spent 8 years running from anything that might hurt me. Rowan was quiet for a long moment. That's the most honest thing you've ever said to me. I know, but it doesn't change anything. It could. How? Elias stood up, moved closer, and did something he'd been too afraid to do for weeks. He reached out and took her hand. Come back. Not as my housekeeper, not as some practical arrangement. Come back as my wife. My real wife. And I swear to you, I'll do better. I'll be better. I'll stop living with ghosts and start living with you. Rowan looked down at their joined hands. I can't go through this again, she whispered. I can't be with someone who's going to look at me and see a mistake every time things get hard. I don't see a mistake. I see the strongest woman I've ever met. I see someone who survived things that should have broken her and came out the other side still fighting. I see... He stopped, swallowed hard. I see my wife. And I want to be worthy of her. Tears were running down Rowan's face now, tracking through the twisted landscape of her scars. You hurt me. I know. You made me feel worthless. I know. And I'm sorry. I'm so damn sorry. She pulled her hand away, and for a terrible moment, Elias thought he'd lost her completely. Then she stood up, walked to the window, and stared out at the frozen street. If I come back, things change. No more running, no more hiding from your feelings, no more acting like Caroline's ghost has more claim to that house than I do. Agreed. And if you ever make me feel like a mistake again, I'm gone. For good. No second chances. Understood. She turned to face him, and Elias saw something in her eyes he'd never seen before. Hope. Then take me home, Elias Mercer. Take me home and prove you mean what you say. They rode back to the ranch in silence, but it was a different kind of silence than before. Not heavy or suffocating, just quiet, peaceful. When they arrived, Elias helped Rowan down from the wagon and carried her bag into the house. But instead of taking it to her small bedroom at the end of the hall, he stopped outside the master bedroom, the one that used to belong to him and Caroline. I need to do something, he said quietly. Will you help me? Together they opened the door. The room was exactly as Caroline had left it 8 years ago. Her clothes still hung in the wardrobe. Her hairbrush still sat on the dresser. The bed was made with the same quilt she'd stitched the year before she died. It was a shrine, a tomb, a monument to grief. Elias stood in the doorway, heart pounding, and then, slowly, carefully, he started taking things down. Caroline's dresses, her jewelry, her books, her letters. He packed them all into a trunk with gentle, reverent hands, and Rowan helped without saying a word. When they finished, the room looked empty, bare, like it had been stripped of everything that made it meaningful. But it also looked clean, ready, waiting for something new. I loved her, Elias said, closing the trunk. I'll always love her. But she's gone, and I'm still here, and so are you. He turned to Rowan. If you want this room, it's yours, ours. We can make it into something new, or we can keep using separate rooms, whatever makes you comfortable. Rowan looked around the bare space. Then she looked at Elias. I'll stay in my room, she said. For now, until we figure out what this is between us. Until we're sure. Elias nodded. That's fair. But I want you to use this room, sleep here, stop hiding from your own house. All right. She smiled then, a real smile, small and fragile but genuine. We're going to be okay, aren't we? I hope so. Me too. The next few weeks were different. Elias still worked the ranch, but he came inside for meals, talked to Rowan about his day, asked about hers. Rowan still cooked and cleaned, but she also started making suggestions about the ranch, ways to improve efficiency, plans for the spring, ideas Elias actually listened to and implemented. They worked together, ate together, sat by the fire together in the evenings. Slowly, carefully, they started building something real. But the town was still a problem. Every time they went into Coldwater Falls, people stared, whispered, made it clear that they thought Rowan didn't belong. Victor Crow was the worst. He'd stop Elias on the street, make comments about how the ranch still looked rough, ask if maybe he was ready to sell now, And he'd always add something about how hard it must be, running a ranch with that kind of help. He never said Rowan's name, never looked at her directly, just made it clear that he thought she was a liability Elias had foolishly taken on. "I'm going to punch him one of these days," Elias muttered after another encounter. "No, you're not." Rowan's voice was calm. "Men like him want you to lose your temper. That's when they win." "How do we beat him then?" "We don't. We ignore him and build something so good he can't tear it down." She was right, but it didn't make the anger burn any less. 6 weeks after Rowan's return, Victor Crow made his move. He showed up at the ranch on a Saturday morning, driving an expensive buggy and wearing his best suit, looking like a man who'd already won. "Mrs. Mercer," he tipped his hat to Rowan, who was working in the garden. "Lovely day, isn't it?" "Mr. Crow." Her voice was flat. "I was hoping to have a word with you, privately, if you don't mind." "I do mind. It's about your future." Victor smiled, but it looked more like a wolf baring its teeth. "See? I've been watching you and Elias these past few weeks, working yourselves to death trying to save this ranch, and I'll be honest with you, ma'am, it's not going to work. We're managing fine. For now. But winter's coming. You've got, what, 80 head of cattle? That's barely enough to break even. One bad season and you'll be bankrupt. That's our concern, not yours." Victor leaned against the fence, all casual confidence. "I'm willing to make you an offer, $5,000. Cash. You take the money, leave Coldwater Falls, and Elias can finally accept the reality that he's done here. Ranch goes to someone who can actually run it properly, and you get to start over somewhere new, somewhere people don't know about. Well, you know." He gestured vaguely at her face. Rowan felt something cold and sharp settle in her stomach. "You want me to leave my husband. I'm offering you a way out of a bad situation. Look, I'm sure Elias is a nice enough fellow, but let's be realistic. You didn't marry him for love. You married him because you were desperate, and now you're stuck on a failing ranch with a man who's still in love with his dead wife. You deserve better than that. You don't know anything about my marriage." "I know more than you think." Victor's smile widened. "I know you spent your first month here sleeping in separate rooms. I know Elias barely looked at you during that time. I know you ran away, and he had to beg you to come back. That's not a marriage, Mrs. Mercer. That's a business arrangement that's making you both miserable." Rowan stood up slowly, dirt on her knees, rage in her chest. "Get off my property. Just think about it. $5,000. You could go anywhere, do anything. No more pitying stares, no more whispers. You could have a real life instead of this." He gestured at the ranch, at the house, at her. "Get off my property." Victor raised his hands in mock surrender. "I'll leave the offer open for 1 week. After that, I'm going to start foreclosure proceedings on Elias's outstanding debts. And trust me, Mrs. Mercer, he's got plenty of those." He climbed back into his buggy and drove away, leaving Rowan standing in the garden with her hands shaking and her mind racing. $5,000. She could leave, start over, build a new life somewhere nobody knew her. It would be so easy. Rowan didn't tell Elias about Victor's offer. She told herself it was because she didn't want to worry him, because he had enough on his plate without adding this. But really, she was thinking about it. Not seriously. Not really. But thinking about it nonetheless. What if Victor was right? What if this was all just prolonging the inevitable? What if she and Elias were just two broken people trying to prop each other up, and eventually they'd both come crashing down? She worked through these thoughts while cooking dinner, while scrubbing floors, while lying awake in her small bedroom at night. And then, on the 5th day after Victor's visit, she found Elias in the barn. He was fixing a broken stall door, sweating despite the cold, muttering curses under his breath. "Need help?" she asked. "I got it." But he didn't got it. The door was old, the hinges were rusted, and his temper was making things worse. "Here," Rowan took the hammer from his hand and examined the door. "You're trying to force it. The wood's swollen. You need to plane it down first." She showed him what she meant, and together they fixed the door properly. When they finished, Elias wiped his forehead and looked at her. "Where'd you learn carpentry?" "My father. Before he died, he taught me all kinds of things my mother thought were unladylike." "I'm glad he did." They stood there in the barn, surrounded by the smell of hay and horses, and Rowan felt something shift inside her. This was her life now, this ranch, this man, This hard, painful, beautiful attempt to build something real out of nothing. Victor's $5,000 couldn't buy that. Elias? Yeah? If someone offered you money to leave me, would you take it? He looked at her like she'd grown a second head. What kind of question is that? Just answer it. No, of course not. Why would I? His eyes narrowed. Did someone offer you money? Rowan hesitated. Then she told him everything. By the time she finished, Elias's face was red with rage. That son of a... He grabbed his coat. I'm going into town. I'm going to break his jaw. No, you're not. The hell I'm not. Elias, she grabbed his arm. Listen to me. He wants you to lose your temper. He wants you to do something stupid, so he has an excuse to go after the ranch. Don't give him that. So what? I just let him insult you? Insult us? No, we prove him wrong. Elias stopped, breathing hard. How? Rowan smiled, that fierce, determined smile he'd come to recognize as her about to do something crazy. We save this ranch. We make it profitable. We show the whole damn town that we're not some charity case or business arrangement. We show them what we really are. And what's that? A partnership, a marriage, a team. She said it with such conviction that Elias felt something loosen in his chest. You really think we can do this? I know we can, but only if you stop treating me like I'm fragile. I'm not fragile, Elias. I'm the strongest thing you've got. He stared at her, this scarred, fierce, impossible woman, and realized she was absolutely right. Okay, he said. Okay, we do it your way. We build this ranch into something Victor Crow can't touch. And when he realizes he's lost, we'll be too busy being happy to care. Elias laughed. Actually laughed. For the first time in 8 years, he felt hope instead of grief. You're terrifying, you know that? Good. You need someone terrifying in your life. She kissed him then, quickly, lightly, on the cheek, and walked out of the barn before he could react. Elias stood there, hand touching the spot she'd kissed, and felt like he'd just been hit by lightning. That night, Elias couldn't sleep. He lay in the master bedroom, Caroline's old room, now just a room, and thought about everything that had happened since Rowan stepped off that stagecoach. He'd been so afraid of losing someone again, afraid of feeling something real, afraid that if he opened his heart, it would destroy him. But Rowan had opened his heart anyway, not gently, not carefully, but with the same fierce determination she brought to everything else. And he was still standing. He got up, walked down the hall, and knocked on her door. Come in. Rowan was sitting by the window, still dressed, looking out at the dark ranch. Can't sleep either? Elias asked. Too much thinking. Yeah. He sat down on the edge of her bed, and they were quiet for a while. I'm glad you stayed, he finally said. Me too. And I'm glad you kissed me, even if it was just on the cheek. Rowan smiled. It was a test, to see if you'd panic and run away. Did I pass? You're still here, aren't you? They looked at each other in the dim light, and Elias felt something shift, not just inside him, but between them, like they'd finally crossed some invisible line they'd been dancing around for weeks. I'm falling in love with you, he said. I don't know when it started. Maybe that first day when you lifted your veil and didn't apologize for who you are. Maybe during the storm when you told me about Sarah. Maybe yesterday in the barn. But it's happening, Rowan, and I'm not going to fight it anymore. Rowan's breath caught. That's a dangerous thing to say to someone you've only known 2 months. I've had 8 years of playing it safe. I'm done with safe. She reached out and took his hand, the same way he'd taken hers in the hotel room. I'm falling for you too, she whispered. But I'm scared. I've already lost everyone I ever loved. I don't know if I can survive losing you too. Then we won't lose each other. We'll fight like hell to make this work. We'll save the ranch. We'll face down Victor Crow and the whole damn town. And we'll do it together. Promise? Promise. Rowan smiled, and even with the scars twisting half her face, Elias thought she was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. Stay with me tonight, she said. Just to sleep. Just to not be alone. So he did. They lay together in that small bed, fully clothed, holding hands in the darkness, and for the first time since Caroline died, Elias felt like he was finally home. Outside, the Wyoming wind howled. Inside, 2 broken people started believing they might just survive after all. Morning came too fast and not fast enough. Elias woke with Rowan's head resting against his shoulder, her breathing steady and peaceful. For a moment he just lay there, terrified to move and break whatever spell had settled over them during the night. Then she stirred, opened her eyes, and looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Morning," he said quietly. "Morning." She sat up, smoothing her hair. "We should get started. Cattle won't feed themselves." Just like that, the moment was over. But something had changed between them, and they both knew it. They worked through breakfast in comfortable silence, Rowan cooking eggs and bacon while Elias made coffee that was actually drinkable for once. They ate together at the kitchen table, knees almost touching, stealing glances when they thought the other wasn't looking. "I've been thinking about the ranch," Rowan said, pushing her empty plate aside. "If we're going to make this work, we need to do more than just survive. We need to expand." "Expand with what money?" "We don't need money. We need smart decisions." She pulled out a piece of paper covered in numbers. "I've been going over the books. You're spending too much on feed because you're buying from Victor's supplier. There's a mill 2 towns over that sells for half the price. That's a full day's ride. So we make the trip once a month instead of buying weekly. We save money and cut Victor out of the equation." She pointed to another column. "And you're underutilizing the south pasture. The grass there is better than what you're using now." Elias stared at the numbers. She was right, about all of it. "How long have you been working on this?" "Every night for the past 3 weeks. I told you, I'm not fragile, and I'm not here to just cook and clean. If this ranch is going to be my home, I'm going to make damn sure it succeeds." He reached across the table and covered her hand with his. "We're going to make it succeed, together." Her fingers tightened around his. Together. The word hung between them like a promise. Then Jim Crawford's voice shattered the moment. "Boss, we got a problem." Elias was out the door before Rowan could stand, and what he saw made his blood run cold. 6 of his cattle were down in the north field, thrashing and foaming at the mouth. 2 were already dead. "What happened?" He vaulted over the fence, Jim right behind him. "Don't know. Found them like this 20 minutes ago. Looks like poison." "Poison? From what?" "There." Jim pointed to a section of fence where someone had dumped a pile of strange-looking grain. "That wasn't there yesterday." Elias knelt beside one of the dying animals, rage and helplessness warring in his chest. There was nothing he could do. The cattle were too far gone. Rowan appeared beside him, took one look at the situation, and grabbed Jim's arm. "Get the other hands. Move the rest of the herd to the south pasture now. Don't let them near this field." "Ma'am, I don't think—" "Now!" Jim ran. Rowan turned to Elias. "We need to call the sheriff." "The sheriff's not going to do anything." "Maybe not, but we need it on record. Someone poisoned your cattle, Elias. That's not bad luck. That's sabotage." She was right, and they both knew who was behind it. The sheriff arrived 3 hours later, took one look at the dead cattle and the poisoned grain, and shook his head. "Could have been anyone. Kids playing a prank, drifters passing through. Can't prove nothing without witnesses." "This wasn't a prank," Elias said through clenched teeth. "Someone deliberately—" "I'm sure they did, but unless you got proof, there's not much I can do." The sheriff tipped his hat to Rowan, carefully avoiding looking at her face. "Sorry for your loss, ma'am." Then he was gone, leaving them standing in a field with 6 dead cattle and the certain knowledge that Victor Crow had just made his opening move. That night, Elias sat at the kitchen table with his head in his hands, while Rowan made tea. Neither of them would drink. "We can't afford to lose 6 head, he said quietly. "We were already cutting it close. This might finish us." "It won't." "You don't know that." "I do." Rowan set a cup in front of him. "Because we're not going to let it. Tomorrow, we're going into town. We're going to file an official complaint. We're going to make sure everyone knows what happened. And we're going to show Victor Crow that we don't scare easy. Rowan, if we accuse him publicly, then he'll have to defend himself publicly. Right now, he's operating in the shadows. We drag him into the light." Elias looked up at her. "You're talking about starting a war. I'm talking about fighting back. There's a difference." She sat down across from him. "I've spent 3 years letting people push me around, letting them decide I wasn't worth defending. I'm done with that. If Victor wants to destroy us, he's going to have to do it where everyone can see." The steel in her voice reminded Elias why he'd fallen for her in the first place. "All right," he said, "we do it your way. But if this goes bad, It won't. Trust me. So he did. The next morning, they rode into Coldwater Falls together, and Elias could feel the town watching them. News of the poisoned cattle had already spread. Everyone knew. Everyone was waiting to see what he'd do about it. They went straight to the general store, where Martha Henley was holding court with half a dozen other women. "Oh, Elias, Mrs. Mercer!" Martha's voice dripped with false sympathy. "We heard about your terrible loss. Such a shame." "It wasn't a loss," Rowan said clearly. "It was sabotage." The whispers started immediately. "Now, dear, I'm sure it was just an accident." 6 cattle don't accidentally eat poisoned grain that mysteriously appeared overnight. Rowan's voice cut through the murmurs. Someone put it there deliberately. Someone who wants to see our ranch fail. Martha's eyes gleamed. "You're not suggesting... I'm not suggesting anything. I'm stating facts. Our cattle were poisoned. The sheriff refuses to investigate, and we want everyone in this town to know what's happening." One of the other women, a sharp-faced matron named Helen Pierce, laughed. "Oh, honey, you think people care about your cattle? You're the woman with the burned face who trapped poor Elias into a marriage he clearly regrets. Half this town thinks you got exactly what you deserved." The silence that followed was absolute. Elias felt rage explode through him like a lightning strike. He opened his mouth to tear Helen Pierce apart, but Rowan's hand on his arm stopped him. She stepped forward, and for the first time since arriving in Coldwater Falls, she pulled back her veil completely. "You're right," she said quietly. "I am the woman with the burned face. These scars? I got them trying to save my 6-year-old daughter from a fire. I failed. She died. And then my husband left me because he couldn't stand to look at me anymore. So yes, I answered a mail-order bride advertisement because I was desperate. And yes, Elias married me out of loneliness. But what we've built since then? That's real. That's earned. And I will not stand here and let small-minded people who've never suffered a day in their lives tell me what I deserve." Helen's face had gone pale. "Now," Rowan continued, "someone in this town poisoned our cattle. Maybe it was Victor Crow, maybe it was someone else, but we're not leaving until we find out who. And if that makes you uncomfortable, Mrs. Pierce, you're welcome to leave." She turned to Martha. "We need supplies. Are you going to serve us, or do we need to take our business elsewhere?" Martha stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly she nodded. "What do you need?" They bought their supplies in silence. The women didn't speak, didn't whisper, just watched with expressions ranging from shock to grudging respect. When they walked out of the store, Elias felt like he could breathe again. "That was stupid?" Rowan's hands were shaking as she climbed into the wagon. "I was going to say incredible. I'm terrified." "You didn't look terrified." "That's because I'm a good liar." She took a deep breath. "Did I just make everything worse?" "No. You made everything clear. There's a difference." They rode back to the ranch in silence, but when they pulled up to the house, Rowan turned to him. "Elias?" "Yeah?" "Thank you for not defending me back there." He frowned. "I wanted to. I was about to—" "I know, but you let me defend myself instead. That matters more than you know." She kissed him then, not on the cheek this time, but properly, on the mouth, hard and fierce and desperate. When she pulled back, Elias was too stunned to speak. "I needed to do that," Rowan said, "in case this all falls apart, and I never get another chance." Then she climbed down from the wagon and went inside, leaving Elias sitting there with his heart pounding and his lips still burning from the kiss. The next 3 weeks were the hardest of Elias's life. Someone cut their fence lines twice, letting cattle wander onto the open range where they were easy prey for rustlers. Someone contaminated their water trough with lamp oil, making half the herd sick. Someone started a rumor in town that the ranch was cursed, that Caroline's ghost was punishing Elias for remarrying. Through it all, Rowan worked like a woman possessed. She repaired fences faster than they could be cut. She set up a night watch rotation so the cattle were never unguarded. She rode into town every few days to buy supplies and show her face, refusing to hide or back down. And slowly, grudgingly, a few people started to respect her for it. Not many, but a few. Jim Crawford's wife brought over a pie one afternoon, mumbled something about being neighborly, and left before Rowan could thank her properly. The blacksmith, a gruff man named Tom Brennan, offered to repair their tools at cost because The work you're doing deserves good equipment. Even Martha Henley started treating Rowan with something approaching civility, but the majority of the town still sided with Victor Crow, still whispered that Elias had made a mistake, still looked at Rowan like she was something broken that should have been thrown away. The worst was Sunday. Rowan insisted they go to church despite Elias's protests. She wore her best dress, left the veil at home, and walked into that building with her head held high. Every eye turned to stare. They sat in the back pew, and Elias could feel the weight of judgment pressing down on them. He wanted to leave, wanted to grab Rowan's hand and walk out and never come back. But she sat perfectly still, hands folded in her lap, and refused to give them the satisfaction. The service was torture. The minister kept glancing at them with an expression that said he'd rather they not be there. The congregation whispered and stared, and when it was finally over, no one spoke to them. No one except Victor Crow. He intercepted them outside, all smiles and false concern. "Elias, Mrs. Mercer, so glad to see you here. I was worried, after all your recent troubles, that you might be too discouraged to show your faces." "We're fine," Elias said flatly. "Are you? Because I heard about the fence cutting and the water trough. Terrible string of bad luck you've been having." "It's not luck, and you know it." Victor's smile widened. "Careful with accusations like that, friend. People might think you're paranoid, unstable, not fit to run a ranch." Rowan stepped between them. "The offer you made me," she said quietly. "Is it still open?" Elias felt his stomach drop. Victor's eyes lit up. "Of course, Mrs. Mercer. $5,000, cash. The offer stands until—" "I'm not taking it." The smile faded. "I just wanted you to know," Rowan continued, "that I considered it. I thought about how much easier my life would be if I just took your money and disappeared. No more sabotage, no more whispers, no more fighting. Then why? Because I'd rather fight beside Elias for the rest of my life than spend one day living with the knowledge that I let a bully like you win. You want this ranch? You want me gone? You're going to have to try harder, because I'm not leaving. Not now. Not ever." She took Elias's arm and walked away, leaving Victor standing there with rage written across his face. They didn't speak until they were halfway home. "You never told me about his offer," Elias said finally. "I was ashamed that I even considered it." "Did you? Really?" Rowan was quiet for a long moment, for about 5 minutes. "Then I realized something. My first husband left me when things got hard. My parents disowned me when I needed them most. Every person I ever trusted chose the easy path over loyalty. But you," she looked at him, "you chose me. Even when it was hard, even when it would have been easier to send me back. You chose me. And I'm not going to repay that by running away." Elias pulled the wagon to a stop right there in the middle of the road. "I need you to understand something," he said. "I didn't choose you out of pity or obligation. I chose you because you're the bravest person I've ever met, and every day I spend with you, I fall a little more in love with the woman you are." Rowan's eyes were bright with tears. "Say that again." "Which part?" "The part where you love me." Elias reached out and cupped her scarred cheek, letting his thumb trace the twisted skin without flinching. "I love you, Rowan Mercer. Not despite your scars, not even because of them. Just you, all of you. The fierce, stubborn, terrifying, incredible woman you are." She kissed him again, and this time it wasn't desperate or fierce. It was soft, tender, full of promise. "I love you too," she whispered against his mouth. "I think I have since that first night when you told me about Caroline and didn't pretend you were over her. You were honest, real, and I've spent my whole life surrounded by people who lie about how they feel." They sat there in the middle of the road, holding each other until the sun started to set and they realized they needed to get home. That night, everything changed. Rowan knocked on Elias's bedroom door just after midnight. "Can I come in?" "Of course." She stood in the doorway in her nightgown, hair loose around her shoulders, looking vulnerable in a way he'd never seen before. "I don't want to sleep alone anymore." Elias stood up. "Rowan, I know we said we'd take things slow. I know we need time. But I'm tired of being careful. I'm tired of protecting myself from hurt. I want—" She took a breath. "I want my husband. The real kind. Not the business arrangement kind." He crossed the room and took her hands. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything. So he pulled her close and kissed her properly. And for the first time in 8 years, Elias Mercer let himself feel something other than grief. They made love slowly, carefully, like two people learning each other for the first time. Rowan traced the scars on Elias's hands from years of ranch work. Elias kissed every inch of Rowan's burned face with a tenderness that made her cry. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the bed that used to belong to his grief and now belonged to their future. No regrets? Rowan whispered. Only that we waited this long. She laughed softly. We needed to wait. We needed to be sure. And now? Now I'm sure. She pressed her palm against his chest, feeling his heartbeat. This is real, Elias, what we have. It's messy and complicated and probably insane, but it's real. I know. Victor's going to come after us harder now. You know that, right? He's not going to stop until we're destroyed or gone. Let him try. Elias pulled her closer. We've survived everything else. We'll survive him too. Rowan closed her eyes, and for the first time since the fire that destroyed her old life, she felt safe. Morning brought a rude awakening. Elias was checking the south pasture when he saw the smoke, thick, black, billowing up from the direction of the barn. He ran faster than he'd ever run in his life, shouting for the ranch hands, praying he'd get there in time. The barn was fully engulfed by the time he arrived. Flames licked up the sides, consuming wood that had stood for 30 years. Inside, horses screamed in terror. Get them out, Elias yelled, but the heat was too intense. The smoke too thick. Then Rowan was there, soaking wet from the water trough, a cloth tied around her face. What are you doing? Elias grabbed her arm. Getting the horses. You can't. I've walked through fire before. I can do it again. She pulled away before he could stop her and ran straight into the inferno. Elias's heart stopped. He tried to follow, but Jim and 2 other hands held him back. She knows what she's doing, boss. She's gonna die in there. But then Rowan emerged, leading 2 terrified horses, her dress smoking, her hair singed. She handed off the horses and went back in, again and again. She pulled out all 6 horses before the roof finally collapsed, and by the time the fire burned itself out, she was coughing so hard she couldn't stand. Elias caught her as she fell, his hands shaking, his mind unable to process what he'd just witnessed. You could have died, he said hoarsely. But I didn't. She coughed again, wincing. The horses are safe, that's what matters. The horses? Rowan, you walked into a burning building 6 times. 7, actually. I went back for the saddles. She managed a weak smile. They're expensive. He didn't know whether to kiss her or shake her. Jim approached, hat in hand, looking shaken. Boss, I found these near the water trough. He held out 3 empty kerosene cans. Fire wasn't no accident. Elias looked at the cans, at the destroyed barn, at Rowan, who just risked her life to save his horses, and something inside him snapped. Get me a horse, he said quietly. Elias, Rowan started. Get me a horse. Now. Jim ran. What are you going to do? Rowan grabbed his arm, her voice sharp with alarm. What I should have done weeks ago. You're going after Victor. He burned down my barn, Rowan. He almost killed you. I'm done playing nice. If you go after him like this, you'll end up in jail or dead. I don't care. Well, I do. She stepped in front of him, both hands on his chest. I care, Elias. You think I survived that fire just so I could watch you throw your life away on revenge? He wants you angry. He wants you stupid. Don't give him that. Then what do you suggest? Her eyes were fierce despite the soot covering her face. We make him pay, but we do it smart. We gather evidence. We get witnesses. We destroy him legally, not physically, because that's the only revenge that actually lasts. Elias wanted to argue, wanted to ride into town and beat Victor Crow until his knuckles bled, but Rowan was right. She was always right. He pulled her against him, burying his face in her smoke-damaged hair. I thought I lost you in there. You didn't, but I could have. But you didn't. She pulled back to look at him. I'm not Caroline, Elias. I'm not fragile. I'm not going to break. And I need you to trust that. He nodded slowly. I trust you. But that doesn't mean I have to like watching you run into burning buildings. Fair enough. She coughed again. Now help me inside before I collapse. Smoke inhalation is catching up with me. They spent the rest of the day dealing with the aftermath. The barn was a total loss. The equipment inside, mostly destroyed. The financial hit was devastating, but the horses were alive. And so was Rowan. And that, Elias told himself, was what mattered. That night, lying in bed with Rowan tucked against his side, both of them reeking of smoke, Elias made a decision. We're not going to let him win. I know. No, I mean, we're going to do exactly what you said. We're going to rebuild. We're going to make this ranch profitable. And we're going to show everyone in Coldwater Falls that we're not victims. We're survivors. Rowan lifted her head to look at him. That's going to take time. Money. Work. So we'll take time. We'll find money. We'll work. Victor's not going to stop sabotaging us. Then we'll guard against sabotage. Elias traced the scar on her cheek. You said it yourself. We're a team, and teams don't quit. She smiled, that fierce, beautiful smile that made his heart skip. No, they don't. They fell asleep holding each other, and for the first time since the barn burned, Elias felt something other than rage. He felt hope. Hope lasted exactly 2 weeks. Elias woke on a Tuesday morning to find Rowan already dressed, standing by the window with an expression he'd learned to dread, closed off, distant, like she was preparing for something terrible. What's wrong? She didn't turn around. Jim said 3 more cattle are sick, same symptoms as before. Poison again? Looks like it. Different field this time. Whoever's doing this knows our patterns now, knows where we move the herd. Elias threw off the covers and started dressing. We'll move them again. Set up more watches. We can... Elias, her voice was flat. We're losing. We're not... We are. The barn's gone. We've lost almost 20 head of cattle in 2 months. We're bleeding money on guards and repairs and replacement equipment. Victor's wearing us down, and we both know it. He walked up behind her, put his hands on her shoulders. So we fight harder. With what? She finally turned to face him, and the exhaustion in her eyes hit him like a fist. We're out of savings. The bank won't give us another loan. I already tried. And every time we fix one thing, Victor breaks something else. Then there is no we anymore, Elias. Don't you see? I brought this on you. Victor's not attacking the ranch. He's attacking me. He wants me gone. And he's willing to destroy everything you've built to make that happen. That's not true. It is true. Before I came here, you were barely surviving, but you were surviving. Now you're drowning because of me. Elias grabbed her arms. Stop it. This isn't your fault. Isn't it? Her voice cracked. I'm the one who stood up to him in town. I'm the one who rejected his offer in front of everyone. I humiliated him, and now he's making us pay for it. If I'd just taken the money and left, then I'd be alone in a house full of ghosts, wishing I'd been brave enough to fight for something that mattered. He pulled her close. You matter, Rowan, more than this ranch, more than anything. She pressed her face against his chest, and he felt her shoulders shake. I'm so tired of fighting. I know, but we're going to get through this. How? He didn't have an answer. The day got worse from there. The poisoned cattle had to be put down. The fence on the east pasture had been cut again overnight. And when Elias rode into town for supplies, he found out the bank had officially refused their loan application. I'm sorry, Elias, the bank manager said, not meeting his eyes. But given your recent losses and the general instability of your operation, we can't justify the risk. The instability isn't natural. Someone's sabotaging us. Do you have proof? You know I don't. Then there's nothing I can do. The manager shuffled papers on his desk. However, I am authorized to inform you that Mr. Crow has made a generous offer to purchase your property. He's willing to pay fair market value and forgive your outstanding debts. Elias felt rage boil up in his throat. Victor put you up to this. Mr. Crow is a valued client and a respected member of this community. If he's willing to help you out of a difficult situation, you should consider it carefully. Tell Victor he can go to hell. He walked out before he said something that would get him arrested. By the time he got back to the ranch, his hands were shaking with suppressed fury. He found Rowan in the kitchen, staring at a letter with an expression that made his stomach drop. What is it? She handed him the letter without speaking. It was from the Philadelphia Society for Charitable Works. They'd heard about her difficult circumstances and wanted to offer assistance. They had a position available at a women's home in Boston, respectable work for a woman of her education. Room and board included. A chance to start fresh away from the unfortunate situation she'd found herself in. Elias crumpled the letter. They want you to leave. They're offering me a way out. You don't need a way out. You have a home here. Do I? Rowan looked at him with hollow eyes. Or do I have a failing ranch and a husband who's going to hate me when we lose everything? I could never hate you. You don't know that. You loved Caroline, and when she died, it destroyed you. What happens when this ranch dies? When everything you've worked for disappears because you were too stubborn to send me away? Rowan, I need to think. She stood up abruptly. I'm going to check on the horses. She left before he could stop her, and Elias sat alone in the kitchen, holding a crumpled letter and wondering how everything had fallen apart so fast. That night, they barely spoke. Rowan moved through the house like a ghost, cooking dinner neither of them ate, washing dishes that didn't need washing. Elias tried to talk to her 3 different times, but she deflected each attempt with brittle efficiency. Finally, lying in bed with an ocean of space between them, Elias broke the silence. Talk to me. About what? About whatever's going through your head right now. Because I can feel you pulling away, and it's scaring the hell out of me. Rowan was quiet for so long he thought she might not answer. Then, in a voice so small he almost didn't hear it, she said, I'm scared I'm going to destroy you. You're not. I destroyed my first husband. He was a good man before the fire. Successful, happy. Then I got burned, and he couldn't handle it. Couldn't handle me. I watched him crumble under the weight of having a wife everyone pitied. Eventually, he hated me for it, for making his life difficult, for being the burden he couldn't escape. I'm not him. No. You're better than him, which makes this worse. She turned to face him in the darkness. Because when you finally realize I'm not worth all this pain, it's going to kill me. Elias reached for her hand, but she pulled away. Don't. Please don't make this harder than it already is. Make what harder? She didn't answer. The next morning, Elias woke to find her side of the bed empty. Not unusual. She was usually up before him, starting breakfast. But when he went downstairs, the kitchen was cold and dark. He found Jim in the barn. Have you seen Rowan? Not since yesterday, boss. Everything all right? I don't know. He searched the house, the barns, the pastures. Her horse was still in the stable. Her coat was still on the hook. But Rowan herself was nowhere to be found. Panic started to set in. Then he saw the piece of paper on the kitchen table, weighted down by her wedding ring. His hands shook as he picked it up. The note was brief, Rowan's handwriting, but messier than usual, like she'd written it in a hurry or through tears. I can't watch you lose everything because of me. I'm sorry. Please don't follow me. This is better for both of us. Elias read it 3 times before the words actually registered. She'd left. She'd actually left. He crumpled the note in his fist and stood there in the empty kitchen, trying to breathe through the crushing weight on his chest. Jim found him 10 minutes later, still standing in the same spot. Boss? You okay? She's gone. Who's... Jim's eyes fell on the wedding ring. Oh hell. I need to find her. Boss, if she left a note, maybe you should... I need to find her. Elias's voice came out harsh, desperate. Now, help me saddle a horse. Elias, Jim put a hand on his shoulder. I know you're hurting, but if you chase after her when she's asked you not to, you're just going to push her further away. I don't care. You should, because that woman loves you enough to leave. Think about that. She loves you so much she's willing to hurt herself to protect you. If you really love her back, you need to respect that. Elias wanted to argue, wanted to punch something, wanted to saddle a horse and tear apart every inch of Wyoming until he found her. But Jim was right. Rowan had made her choice, and chasing after her now would only prove she'd been right to leave. So instead, he went back inside the empty house and tried to figure out how to survive the silence. The ranch died faster than Elias expected. Without Rowan cooking, he forgot to eat. Without her organizing, work fell through the cracks. Without her presence, the house felt like a tomb. Jim and the other hands tried to help, but they couldn't fill the void she'd left behind. Nobody could. After 3 days, Elias stopped sleeping in their bed. He couldn't stand the smell of her still lingering on the pillows, couldn't handle the physical proof that she'd been real and was now gone. He started sleeping in the barn instead, started avoiding the house entirely except to grab supplies. The town noticed, of course. They always noticed. Martha Henley cornered him at the general store on the 4th day. "We heard your wife left. Such a shame, though I suppose it was bound to happen eventually." Elias didn't respond, just paid for his supplies and walked out. Victor Crow was less subtle. He showed up at the ranch on the 5th day, all smiles and false sympathy. "Heard you're having some domestic troubles. Wanted to offer my condolences." Elias was mucking out stalls and didn't stop working. "What do you want, Victor?" "Same thing I've always wanted, to buy this ranch before it completely falls apart. Now that your wife's gone, there's no reason for you to keep torturing yourself. Sell to me, take the money, start over somewhere else." "No." "Elias, be reasonable. You're barely holding on. You've got maybe 3 months before the bank forecloses. Why drag this out?" "Because it's my ranch, and you can't have it." Victor's smile faded. "Your stubbornness is going to leave you with nothing." "Then I'll have nothing, but at least it'll be mine." Victor stared at him for a long moment. Then he shook his head. "You're a fool, Mercer. Always have been." He left, and Elias went back to mucking stalls, trying not to think about how Victor was probably right. By the end of the first week, Elias had stopped pretending to care about the ranch. The cattle roamed where they wanted, the fences stayed broken, the house gathered dust. Jim finally snapped on day 8. "Boss, this has got to stop." "What does?" "This, you, giving up." Jim gestured at the ranch. "Mrs. Mercer left because she thought you'd be better off without her. You're proving her right." "What do you want me to do, Jim? Pretend I'm fine? Pretend my wife didn't walk out on our marriage?" "She didn't walk out on your marriage. She walked out to save it. There's a difference." "What the hell does that mean?" "It means she loves you, you idiot. She left because staying was going to destroy you both. But if you let this ranch fall apart, if you give up on everything you built together, then she left for nothing." Elias sat down hard on a hay bale. "I don't know how to do this without her." "Then figure it out, because right now you're proving every person in Coldwater Falls right. They all said you couldn't handle a wife like her, that you weren't strong enough. Are they right?" "I don't care what they think." "You should, because she cares. Mrs. Mercer spent months proving to this town that she belonged here, that she was strong enough to handle anything they threw at her, and now you're going to let them win? Going to prove she was just some charity case who couldn't hack it?" The words hit Elias like a slap. Jim was right. They were all right. All. He'd been so focused on his own pain that he hadn't thought about what his collapse would mean for Rowan, how it would look to the town, how it would confirm every terrible thing they'd said about her. She'd fought so hard to prove herself, and he was destroying that fight by giving up. "Where do I start?" he asked quietly. Jim smiled. "Same place you always do, one step at a time." So Elias got up. He fixed the fences. He checked the cattle. He cleaned the house. He started cooking meals again, even though they tasted like ash in his mouth. He didn't do it because he wanted to. He did it because Rowan would have wanted him to, because she'd worked too hard to let it all fall apart now. But every night, lying alone in that bed, he wondered if she was okay, if she was safe, if she regretted leaving. And every morning he woke up and kept going anyway. On day 10, old Henry Walsh showed up at the ranch. Henry was the oldest ranch hand Elias had ever employed. 73 years old, missing half his teeth, and meaner than a snake when he wanted to be. He'd quit 2 years ago to live with his daughter in town, but apparently he'd heard about Rowan leaving. "Heard you've been feeling sorry for yourself," Henry said without preamble. "Nice to see you too, Henry." "Don't get smart with me, boy. I changed your diapers when you were knee-high to a grasshopper. I've earned the right to tell you when you're being stupid. I'm not—" "You let her go without a fight." Elias felt his jaw tighten. "She wanted to leave." "Bull. She wanted you to fight for her, wanted you to prove she was worth fighting for. Instead, you read her note and gave up. She asked me not to follow her. And you listened?" Henry spat into the dirt. "Women don't say what they mean half the time. They say what they think they're supposed to say. Your wife wrote that note because she thought leaving was the noble thing to do, the selfless thing. But what she really wanted was for you to show up and tell her she was wrong. You don't know that." I know she spent 3 months proving to everyone in this town that she wasn't going to back down from anything. You think a woman like that wants to be left alone? She wants to be fought for. Elias sat down on the porch steps, suddenly exhausted. I don't know where she is. Sure you do. She's at the hotel in town. Been there since she left. Waiting. Waiting for what? Henry gave him a look that said he was the dumbest man alive. For you to come get her, you fool. For you to prove that she's more important than your pride or your fear or whatever stupid reason you've convinced yourself it's better to let her go. What if she doesn't want to come back? Then at least you'll know. At least you'll have tried. But right now, you're just a coward hiding behind a note because you're too scared to face the woman you love. The words stung because they were true. Elias had been hiding, using Rowan's note as an excuse not to fight, telling himself he was respecting her wishes when, really, he was just terrified of rejection. What do I say to her? The truth, that you're an idiot, that you love her, that you're not giving up on this marriage even if she is, and then you bring her home. Henry stood up, bones creaking. But you better do it soon, boy, because Victor Crow's been sniffing around that hotel, and if he gets to her first, you're going to lose her for good. That got Elias's attention. Victor's talking to Rowan? Every day for the past 3 days, offering her money, offering her a way out, telling her she deserves better than a failing ranch and a husband who can't protect her. Rage and fear warred in Elias's chest. I'm going into town. About damn time. Elias saddled his horse faster than he'd ever done in his life. He didn't bother with a plan, didn't think about what he'd say, just rode toward Coldwater Falls with his heart pounding and his mind racing. He found Rowan exactly where Henry said she'd be, sitting in the hotel dining room, staring at a cup of coffee she wasn't drinking. She looked terrible, thinner, paler, like she hadn't been sleeping any better than he had. And sitting across from her looking smug and satisfied was Victor Crow. Elias walked straight to their table. We need to talk. Rowan looked up, and the expression on her face, shock, hope, fear, all mixed together, nearly broke him. Elias, Not here. He looked at Victor. Leave. Victor smiled lazily. I'm having a conversation with Mrs. Mercer, or I suppose it's Miss Hale now, since she's left you. She's still my wife, and you need to leave, now. Or what? You'll hit me? In front of witnesses? That'll look good at your trial. Elias leaned down until they were eye to eye. I don't care about trials. I don't care about witnesses. All I care about is my wife. And if you don't walk away right now, I'm going to make you regret every second you've spent trying to destroy my life. Something in his voice must have convinced Victor he was serious because he stood up slowly. This isn't over, Mercer. Yes, it is. You lost. You just don't know it yet. Victor walked away, and Elias finally looked at Rowan. She was staring at him with tears streaming down her face. You came. Of course I came. Did you think I wouldn't? You respected my note. You gave me space. I thought you were letting me go. I'm an idiot. Elias sat down in the chair Victor had vacated. I read your note and convinced myself you wanted to be left alone. That I'd be selfish to chase after you, but Henry set me straight. Henry? Showed up this morning and called me a coward. He was right. I've been hiding behind your words because I was too scared to face you, and here you say you didn't want to come home. Rowan reached across the table and took his hand. I want to come home. I've wanted to come home every single day, but I can't watch you lose everything, Elias. I can't be the reason your life falls apart. Then don't be. Be the reason it comes together. Be my partner, my wife. The person I fight beside instead of the person I protect. Because that's what I got wrong. I kept trying to shield you from Victor, from the town, from everything. But you don't need shielding. You need support. And I should have been giving you that all along. I left because I thought it would save you. It almost killed me. The ranch is falling apart without you. I'm falling apart without you. And if you don't come home, Victor wins. Not just the ranch. Everything. He wins because he convinced us we couldn't make it together. Rowan wiped her eyes. What if we can't? Then we fail together. But at least we'll have tried. At least we'll know we fought for something that mattered. She squeezed his hand so hard it hurt. I love you. I've loved you since you stood up for me in that store. Since you let me fight my own battles. Since you kissed my scars like they didn't matter. They don't matter. They do, but you make them matter less. She stood up. Take me home, Elias. Take me home and let's figure out how to save this ranch together. He pulled her into his arms right there in the hotel dining room, in front of everyone watching, and kissed her like his life depended on it. Because it did. They walked out of that hotel together, and every eye in Coldwater Falls followed them. Rowan didn't wear her veil, didn't duck her head or try to hide. She walked beside Elias with her chin up and her hand in his, and for once, she didn't care who was staring. Martha Henley stood outside the general store, mouth hanging open. Helen Pierce actually stopped mid-conversation to gawk. Even the blacksmith paused his work to watch them pass. Let them look, Elias muttered. I am. Rowan squeezed his hand. For the first time, I actually am. They were halfway to where Elias had tied his horse when Victor Crow stepped into their path. So you're going back to him. Victor's voice was cold. After everything I offered you. After I tried to help you escape that disaster of a marriage. You didn't try to help me, Rowan said quietly. You tried to use me. There's a difference. I was offering you freedom. No. You were offering me money to disappear so you could take what you wanted without opposition. I'm worth more than that. Victor's face darkened. You think you're going to save that ranch? It's dying. Another few months and the bank will take it anyway. All you're doing is prolonging the inevitable. Maybe, Elias said, but we'll go down fighting, together, which is more than you'll ever understand. You're fools, both of you. Probably. Elias put his arm around Rowan. But we're fools who love each other. What have you got, Victor? Victor opened his mouth, closed it, and for the first time since Elias had known him, looked genuinely lost for words. They left him standing there and rode home together, Rowan sitting in front of Elias on the horse, both of them quiet and exhausted, but together. When they reached the ranch, Jim and Henry were waiting on the porch. About time, Henry said. Took you long enough. Shut up, old man. But Elias was smiling. Rowan slid down from the horse and looked at the ranch, the broken fences, the damaged barn, the house that needed so much work. Then she looked at Elias. Where do we start? With this. He pulled her wedding ring from his pocket. I've been carrying it around since you left. Couldn't bring myself to put it away. Rowan held out her hand, and he slipped the ring back on her finger where it belonged. Now we start, she said. The next 2 weeks were brutal. They worked from before dawn until after dark, repairing what could be repaired and improvising the rest. Jim and Henry helped, along with 2 other ranch hands who'd stuck around despite not being paid in a month. Rowan threw herself into the work with the same fierce determination she'd shown when she first arrived. She fixed fences, tended cattle, organized supplies, and somehow still found time to cook meals that actually tasted like food. Elias watched her sometimes when she didn't know he was looking, watched the way she moved through the ranch like she owned it, the way she commanded respect from the hands without even trying, the way she'd transformed from a mail-order bride nobody wanted into the backbone of everything they were building. You're staring again, she said one evening, catching him watching while she mucked out stalls. Can't help it. You're covered in manure and still the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. You need your eyes checked. My eyes are fine. It's everyone else in this town who's blind. She threw a piece of straw at him, laughing, and Elias felt something loosen in his chest that had been tight since the day she left. They were going to make it. Maybe not financially. The bank was still threatening foreclosure, and they were bleeding money faster than they could make it. But emotionally, mentally, as a couple, they were solid. Until Sunday arrived. Rowan insisted they go to church again, and Elias couldn't come up with a good enough reason to refuse. So they got dressed in their best clothes, rode into town, and walked through those church doors like they had every right to be there. The congregation went quiet the moment they entered. Elias felt Rowan tense beside him, but she kept walking. They made their way to the back pew and sat down, and slowly, reluctantly, the service began. The minister looked uncomfortable the entire time. He kept glancing at them like they were a problem he didn't know how to solve. His sermon was about duty and obligation and staying in your proper place, and Elias felt his anger building with every word. But Rowan sat perfectly still, hands folded in her lap, face serene, despite the pointed message being delivered from the pulpit. When the service finally ended, people filed out quickly, avoiding eye contact. Martha Henley gave them a tight nod. Helen Pierce pretended they didn't exist. The rest of the congregation simply hurried past. They were the last ones to leave, and Elias was helping Rowan with her coat when Victor Crow's voice rang out across the empty church. "Well, well, the prodigal wife returns." Elias turned to find Victor standing in the aisle with 3 of his ranch hands flanking him. All of them looked like they'd been drinking despite the early hour. "We're leaving, Victor. Don't do this." "Do what?" "I'm just making conversation." Victor walked closer, and Elias could smell whiskey on his breath. "I'm curious, Mrs. Mercer. What made you come back? Was it love or just the fact that nobody else would have you?" "That's enough." Elias stepped between them. "Is it?" "Because I've been very patient. I've made fair offers. I've tried to be reasonable. And all I've gotten in return is disrespect from a failed rancher and his charity case wife." "Call her that again," Elias said quietly, "and I'll knock your teeth down your throat." Victor smiled. There it is. The real Elias Mercer. The violent drunk who got his wife killed through negligence. That's what you are, isn't it? That's why you hid away for 8 years, because you knew you didn't deserve another chance. The words hit like a physical blow. Elias felt the air leave his lungs, felt 8 years of guilt and grief come rushing back, felt the terrible truth of it, that he had been negligent, that he should have gotten Caroline to a doctor sooner, that maybe, just maybe, if he'd been paying more attention, she'd still be alive. "Elias," Rowan's hand on his arm, "don't listen to him." "But he's right." Elias's voice sounded hollow even to his own ears. "I failed Caroline, and I'm failing you. Everything Victor's done to us, the poisoned cattle, the burned barn, all of it. It's happening because I wasn't strong enough to protect you." "That's not... Maybe this marriage was a mistake." The words came out before he could stop them. The same words he'd said once before, months ago. The words that had driven Rowan away the first time. The silence that followed was crushing. Rowan's hand fell away from his arm. When he finally found the courage to look at her, the expression on her face made him want to die. "You don't mean that," she whispered. "I don't know what I mean anymore. I'm tired, Rowan. I'm so damn tired of fighting battles I can't win." Victor laughed, sharp and cruel. "Finally, some honesty. You see, Mrs. Mercer, even your husband knows this was doomed from the start. A scarred woman and a broken man trying to play house. It would be funny if it wasn't so pathetic." Something in Rowan's expression shifted then. Not hurt, not sadness, rage. She turned to Victor with fury blazing in her eyes. "You want to know what's pathetic? A man so threatened by a woman with scars that he spends months trying to destroy her life. A bully so insecure about his own worth that he has to tear down everyone around him to feel powerful. That's pathetic, Mr. Crow. You're pathetic." "Careful, Mrs. Mercer." "No, you be careful. Because I'm done playing your games. I'm done letting you dictate what happens in my marriage. And I'm done standing here listening to you insult the man I love." She grabbed Elias's hand. "We're leaving. And if you ever come near my husband or my ranch again, I will make you regret it." She pulled Elias toward the door, but Victor's voice stopped them. "You think you've won something? You think standing up to me changes anything? In 6 months, that ranch will be mine. The bank's already started foreclosure proceedings. It's over." Rowan turned back, and the smile on her face was terrifying. "Then I guess we'll see you in 6 months, Mr. Crow, and we'll see who's still standing." They walked out into the bright Sunday morning, and Elias felt like he'd been hit by a train. "I shouldn't have said that," he said as soon as they were out of earshot, "about the marriage being a mistake. I didn't mean it. I was just exhausted, overwhelmed, human." Rowan stopped walking and turned to face him. "I know you didn't mean it, Elias. But you need to understand something. I can't keep doing this. I can't keep wondering if the next time things get hard, you're going to decide I'm not worth the trouble. You are worth it. You're worth everything. Then prove it." Her voice was steady, but her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Stop letting Victor get in your head. Stop letting guilt over Caroline control your life. And stop apologizing for loving me. I'm not... You are. Every time you call this marriage a mistake, even when you don't mean it, you're apologizing. You're saying that choosing me was wrong, that I'm something you have to justify or explain or defend. I need you to stop doing that. Elias pulled her close, buried his face in her hair. I'm sorry. You're right. I've been so busy trying to protect you that I forgot to just love you. That's what you need, what we both need. Not protection, just love. And trust, Rowan added quietly. Trust that we can handle whatever Victor throws at us. Trust that we're strong enough together to survive this. Are we? I don't know. But I'd rather find out trying than give up now. They stood there in the middle of the street, holding each other, while the rest of Coldwater Falls went about their Sunday routines around them. The ride back to the ranch was quiet, but it was a different kind of quiet than before. Not heavy with unspoken tension, just thoughtful. Both of them processing what had happened, what had been said, what it all meant. When they arrived, Henry was waiting on the porch with an expression that said something was wrong. What happened? Elias climbed down from the horse. Bank inspector came by while you were gone. Said he needs to do a full assessment of the property next week. They're moving forward with foreclosure. Rowan's face went pale. Next week? That's not enough time. Time for what? Elias asked. To fix everything. To show them the ranch is still viable. To prove we're worth saving. She turned to Elias. We need to make this place look profitable by next week, or we lose everything. That's impossible. Maybe, but we have to try. Henry cleared his throat. There might be one way. It's risky as hell, but it could work. What? Cattle drive. We take what's left of the herd, about 60 head, and drive them to Fort Laramie. Army's paying top dollar for beef right now. We could make enough to satisfy the bank and have some left over. Elias shook his head. Fort Laramie's 4 days away, through rough country. We'd need at least 6 experienced hands, and we've only got 4 including you and Jim. I could ride, Rowan said. Absolutely not. Why not? I've been working this ranch for months. I know cattle as well as any of your hands. It's dangerous. Rustlers, bad weather, river crossings. I don't care. If this is our last chance to save the ranch, I'm not sitting at home waiting to hear how it went. I'm coming with you. Elias looked at her, this stubborn, fierce, impossible woman, and knew there was no point arguing. Fine, but you follow orders. If I say something's too dangerous, you listen. Deal? Deal. Henry grinned. This is either going to save your ranch or kill you all. Either way, it'll be interesting. They spent the next 3 days preparing. Gathered supplies, checked equipment, planned the route. Jim sent word to 2 other ranchers he knew, asking if they could spare hands for the drive. One said yes, one said no. So they'd be going with 5 people total. Elias, Rowan, Jim, Henry, and a young hand named Billy, who was either very brave or very stupid. The night before they left, Elias couldn't sleep. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about all the ways this could go wrong. Rowan rolled over and put her hand on his chest. Stop thinking so loud. Can't help it. This is insane. We're about to drive 60 head of cattle through hostile territory with a crew of 5, including a 73-year-old man and a woman who's never done a cattle drive in her life. Don't forget Billy, he's never done one either. That doesn't make me feel better. Rowan propped herself up on one elbow. We're going to be fine. You don't know that. No, but I believe it, and right now that's enough. She kissed him softly. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. But Elias couldn't sleep. So instead, he held Rowan close and tried to memorize the feeling of her in his arms, just in case this was the last peaceful moment they'd have for a while. They left at dawn, driving the cattle north toward Fort Laramie. The first day went smoothly, too smoothly. The cattle cooperated, the weather held, and by nightfall they'd covered good ground. The second day, the trouble started. They were crossing a shallow river when one of the steers panicked and stampeded back toward the bank, taking half the herd with it. It took 2 hours to round them up again, and by the time they did, everyone was soaked and exhausted. This is going great, Billy muttered, wringing out his shirt. Shut up, kid, Henry said, but there was no real heat in it. That night, sitting around the campfire, Elias found himself watching Rowan. She was talking to Jim about the best route for tomorrow, her face animated despite the exhaustion. She looked happy, actually happy, like this cattle drive through dangerous territory was exactly where she wanted to be. She's something else, Henry said, following his gaze. Yeah. You know, I've worked ranches for 50 years, seen all kinds of people, rich folks playing cowboy, drifters looking for easy money, desperate men trying to outrun their past. But I've never seen anyone like her. What do you mean? Someone who's got nothing to prove but proves it anyway. She could have stayed home, could have let you do this without her, but she's here, busting her tail because that's who she is. Henry poked at the fire. You're a lucky man, Elias. Don't forget that. I won't. The third day nearly killed them. They were halfway through a narrow canyon when rocks started falling from the cliffs above. Not a landslide, just enough to spook the cattle into a panic. The herd scattered in 3 directions, and it took every ounce of skill they had to keep them from disappearing into the wilderness. Rowan's horse took a bad step and nearly threw her. Elias's heart stopped as he watched her struggle to stay in the saddle, but she managed it, got the horse under control, and kept working like nothing had happened. By the time they had the herd back together, they'd lost 2 steers and everyone was rattled. We should turn back, Billy said. This is too dangerous. We're more than halfway there, Jim countered. Turning back now doesn't make sense. Neither does getting killed for some cattle. Then leave, Rowan said quietly. Nobody's forcing you to be here, Billy. If you want to go back, go, but the rest of us are seeing this through. Billy looked at her, at the determination in her scarred face, and something in his expression shifted. I'm not leaving, just needed to complain for a minute. I'm good now. They pushed on. The 4th day they reached Fort Laramie with 58 head of cattle, 2 less than they'd started with, but still enough to make the trip worthwhile. The Army quartermaster took one look at the herd and nodded. Good stock. I'll give you top price. $40 a head. Elias did the math in his head. $2,300. More than enough to satisfy the bank and have money left over for repairs. They'd done it. The ride back to Coldwater Falls took 3 days instead of 4. They were lighter, faster, and running on pure relief. When they finally pulled into town, exhausted and filthy and triumphant, half the population was waiting for them. Word had spread about the cattle drive, about how Elias Mercer and his scarred wife had done the impossible. Martha Henley actually smiled at them. Tom Brennan tipped his hat. Even Helen Pierce managed a grudging nod of respect. But Victor Crow was nowhere to be seen. They went straight to the bank and Elias slapped the money down on the manager's desk. That's enough to cover our debts and halt the foreclosure. Count it. The manager counted it twice, then looked up with an expression somewhere between surprise and disappointment. This is sufficient. I'll file the paperwork immediately. You do that. Elias grabbed Rowan's hand. Come on, let's go home. They walked out of that bank as the sun was setting, painting Coldwater Falls in shades of gold and amber. People watched them pass, and for the first time, the looks weren't full of pity or contempt. They were something else, something that looked almost like respect. When they reached their wagon, Rowan stopped. Wait, there's something I need to do. Before Elias could ask what, she walked straight to the center of town, climbed up on the raised platform near the general store, and raised her voice. Can I have everyone's attention, please? People stopped, turned, stared. Rowan stood there in her filthy traveling clothes, her scarred face visible to everyone, and spoke clearly. My name is Rowan Mercer. Some of you know me as the mail-order bride, the burned woman, the charity case who trapped Elias into a marriage he didn't want. I've heard all the names, all the whispers, and for a long time I believed them. Believed I didn't deserve to be here, didn't deserve the life I was trying to build. She paused, looking around at the crowd, but I was wrong. I do deserve to be here. Not because I've earned it through suffering, but because I've fought for it. Every day, every moment. And I'm not apologizing anymore. Not to this town, not to anyone. My face may be scarred, but my life isn't. And if that makes you uncomfortable, that's your problem, not mine. The silence was absolute. Then someone started clapping. Slow at first, then faster. Elias looked over to see Henry Walsh applauding, a huge grin on his weathered face. Jim joined in, then Billy, then Tom Brennan, then Martha Henley. One by one, the people of Coldwater Falls started clapping for Rowan Mercer, and Elias felt tears burning in his eyes. Rowan climbed down from the platform and walked straight to him. Take me home, she said, please, before I start crying in front of everyone. So he did. That night, lying in bed with Rowan curled against him, Elias finally asked the question that had been burning in his mind since the cattle drive. Why did you really insist on coming with us? It wasn't just about the ranch, was it? Rowan was quiet for a moment. I needed to prove something to myself. that I was still capable, still strong, that the fire didn't just take my face, it took my courage too. For 3 years, I let fear control my life, let other people tell me what I was worth. But on that cattle drive, working beside you and the others, I felt like myself again, like the person I was before everything fell apart. You've always been that person. Maybe, but I needed to remember it, needed to prove I could still do hard things, still face danger, still be more than just the woman with the scars. Elias kissed the top of her head. You're the strongest person I know, scarred or not. Always have been. I'm starting to believe that. They fell asleep holding each other, and for the first time since Caroline died, Elias didn't dream about the past. He dreamed about the future instead. Spring came to Coldwater Falls like a promise being kept. The snow melted, revealing brown earth that would soon turn green. The cattle grew fat on fresh grass. And Mercer Ranch, which had been dying for 8 years, finally started to feel like something worth saving. Elias woke early most mornings to find Rowan already in the kitchen, coffee brewing, making plans for the day. She'd transformed from the frightened mail-order bride who'd stepped off that stagecoach into someone else entirely. Someone who belonged here. Someone who'd claimed this life as her own. We need to expand the herd, she said one morning, spreading papers across the table. With the money from Fort Laramie, we can buy breeding stock, build the numbers back up. That'll take years. Good thing we've got years. She looked up at him, and the certainty in her eyes made his chest tight. We're not going anywhere, Elias. This ranch is ours. Time we started acting like it. They bought 20 head of breeding cattle from a rancher 2 counties over, hired 2 more hands to help with the work, started repairing the barn properly instead of just patching it together. Slowly, methodically, they rebuilt what had been broken. But it wasn't just the ranch that was healing. Elias found himself laughing more, smiling at things that would have passed unnoticed before. He'd wake up in the middle of the night sometimes and just watch Rowan sleep, amazed that this fierce, stubborn woman had chosen to stay with him. You're doing it again, she murmured one night, eyes still closed. Doing what? Staring at me like you're afraid I'll disappear. Can't help it. Sometimes I still can't believe you're real. She opened her eyes then, rolled over to face him. I'm real, and I'm not going anywhere. You need to start believing that. I'm trying. Try harder. But she was smiling when she said it. The town changed too, though more slowly. People still stared at Rowan when she came into town, but the whispers had shifted from cruel to curious. Martha Henley started inviting her to church socials. Tom Brennan's wife brought over preserves with a note saying she admired Rowan's courage. Even Helen Pierce managed a stiff greeting when they crossed paths. It wasn't acceptance exactly, but it was something. A grudging acknowledgement that Rowan Mercer had earned her place in Coldwater Falls through sheer force of will. Victor Crow was notably absent from all of it. After the cattle drive, he'd retreated to his ranch and hadn't been seen in town for weeks. Rumors said he was furious about losing his bet, that Elias would fail. Other rumors said he was planning something bigger. Elias didn't care either way. He was too busy building a life to worry about Victor's wounded pride. Then one Saturday afternoon, everything came to a head. Elias and Rowan had come into town for supplies when they heard shouting from the saloon. They exchanged a glance, then walked over to see what the commotion was about. Victor Crow stood in the middle of the street, drunk and angry, yelling at anyone who'd listen. You all think he's some kind of hero now? Elias Mercer and his freak show wife? They got lucky once. One cattle drive doesn't change the fact that he's a failure who married a woman nobody else wanted. The street had gone quiet. People were watching, waiting to see what would happen. Rowan's hand tightened on Elias's arm. Let's just go. No, Elias stepped forward. I'm tired of walking away from him. He crossed the street until he was standing directly in front of Victor. You're drunk. Go home. I'm drunk? You're the one who's been drunk on false hope for months. That ranch is dying. Your wife is a joke, and everyone in this town knows it. That's not true, Martha Henley said, stepping out of the general store. Not anymore. Victor spun to face her. What? What you're saying, it's not true. Maybe it was once, but not now. Martha looked at Rowan. Mrs. Mercer has proven herself. She's worked harder than any woman I've ever known. She saved that ranch, and if you can't see that, you're blind as well as drunk. Other voices joined in. Tom Brennan. Jim Crawford, even the minister who'd been so uncomfortable with Rowan's presence just months before. One by one, the people of Coldwater Falls stood up for the woman they'd once rejected. Victor looked around, face red with rage and humiliation. "You're all fools, every last one of you." "Maybe," Elias said quietly, "but we're fools who know what matters. Family, loyalty, fighting for the people we love. You don't understand any of that, Victor, and that's why you'll always be alone." Victor lunged at him, fist swinging wild. Elias sidestepped easily. The man was too drunk to aim straight, and Victor stumbled, fell, and landed face first in the mud. He lay there for a moment, breathing hard, then slowly pushed himself up. When he looked at Elias, the rage in his eyes had been replaced by something else, something that looked almost like defeat. "I could destroy you," he said hoarsely. "I have the money, the connections. I could make your life hell. You already tried that. It didn't work. I could try harder. You could, but it won't change anything. Because what Rowan and I have, what we've built together, you can't touch that. You can burn our barn, poison our cattle, turn the town against us, but you can't break what we are to each other. And that drives you crazy, doesn't it? That the thing you want most, power over us, is the one thing you'll never have." Victor stared at him for a long moment. Then he stood up, mud dripping from his expensive clothes, and walked away without another word. The street erupted in conversation, people congratulating Elias, asking Rowan if she was all right, already turning Victor's drunken spectacle into the story they'd be telling for years. But Elias barely heard any of it. He was looking at Rowan, at the tears streaming down her scarred face, and all he could think was that he'd finally done it. He'd finally stood up for her the way she'd always deserved. "You okay?" he asked quietly. She nodded, unable to speak, and threw her arms around him right there in the middle of the street. They held each other while the town watched, and Elias realized that this moment, this public declaration of love and loyalty, was what they'd both needed. Not just for themselves, but to show everyone else that they weren't hiding anymore, weren't ashamed, weren't apologizing for existing. That night, back at the ranch, they sat on the porch watching the sun set over land that finally felt like home. "Do you think Victor will try again?" Rowan asked. "Probably. He's not the type to give up easy." "Neither are we." "No, we're not." Elias pulled her closer. "You know what the difference is between us and him?" "What?" "He fights because he's afraid of losing. We fight because we have something worth protecting. That makes us stronger." Rowan rested her head on his shoulder. "When did you get so wise?" "I married a smart woman. Some of it must have rubbed off." She laughed, and the sound of it made Elias's heart feel too big for his chest. Summer arrived with heat that made the work harder, but the evenings sweeter. The ranch continued to grow. The cattle multiplied. The bank account, while not healthy, was at least no longer critical. More importantly, Elias and Rowan had found a rhythm. They worked together during the day, ate together in the evening, and fell into bed exhausted but content every night. It wasn't perfect. They still argued about money, about ranch decisions, about Rowan working too hard. But it was real. Messy and complicated, and absolutely real. One evening in late July, Rowan found Elias in the barn working on a new stall door. "I have something to tell you." The serious tone in her voice made him set down his tools. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. I went to see the doctor in town today." Elias felt his heart stop. "Are you sick?" "No, I'm pregnant." The world tilted sideways. Elias stood there, hammer in hand, trying to process what she'd just said. Pregnant. Rowan was pregnant. They were going to have a baby. "Say something," Rowan said nervously. "You're scaring me." He set down the hammer before he dropped it. "Are you sure?" Doctor confirmed it. About 2 months along, he thinks. 2 months. We're going to have a baby in 7 months, give or take. Elias crossed the distance between them in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms. "Are you happy about this?" Rowan asked against his chest. "I know we didn't plan it. I know things are still tight with money. I know. I'm terrified. And thrilled. And completely unprepared. But yes, I'm happy." He pulled back to look at her. "Are you?" Rowan's eyes were bright with tears. I'm scared. After Sarah, I didn't think I deserved another chance. But yes, I'm happy too. They held each other in that barn as the sun set outside, both of them crying, both of them laughing, both of them feeling the weight of this new life they'd created together. The pregnancy changed things in ways both expected and unexpected. Rowan refused to slow down at first, insisting she could still do all the work she'd been doing before. Elias had to physically stop her from climbing on the barn roof to fix a leak when she was 4 months along. You're going to fall and kill yourself and our baby, he said, practically dragging her off the ladder. I'm pregnant, not disabled. There's a difference between being capable and being reckless. Let Jim do the roof work. They compromised. Rowan handled the bookkeeping, the meal planning, and the lighter ranch work. She hated every minute of being treated carefully, but she loved the baby growing inside her more than she hated the restrictions. The town noticed, of course. People started treating Rowan differently, not with pity anymore, but with the cautious kindness reserved for expectant mothers. Women who'd barely spoken to her before suddenly had advice about morning sickness and nursery preparation. Martha Henley organized a quilting circle to make baby blankets. Helen Pierce grudgingly admitted that maybe Rowan wasn't such a disaster after all. And the minister actually smiled at them during Sunday service, which felt like a small miracle in itself. But not everything was gentle. 5 months into the pregnancy, Rowan woke Elias in the middle of the night, clutching her stomach. Something's wrong. The terror in her voice sent ice through his veins. They rode into town at dangerous speed, and by the time they reached the doctor's house, Rowan was crying from pain and fear. The doctor examined her while Elias paced outside, praying to any force in the universe that would listen that they wouldn't lose this baby, that Rowan wouldn't have to survive losing another child. After what felt like hours, the doctor emerged. She's fine. The baby's fine. Just some cramping, normal at this stage, though alarming. I've given her something to help her rest. You can take her home in the morning. Elias nearly collapsed with relief. He spent the night in a chair beside Rowan's bed, holding her hand while she slept, and made promises to himself about being a better husband, a better father, a better man than he'd been before. When Rowan woke just before dawn, she found him watching her. You look terrible, she whispered. I thought I was going to lose you both. You didn't. We're okay. We're going to be okay. I can't do this without you, Rowan. I need you to know that. If something happened to you or the baby, I wouldn't survive it. She squeezed his hand. Then it's a good thing nothing's going to happen. This baby is stubborn. Gets it from both of us. Takes more than a little cramping to scare us off. Despite everything, Elias smiled. Winter came early that year, and with it, the baby. Rowan went into labor on a freezing December night, and the midwife barely made it to the ranch before things got serious. Elias paced the hallway outside their bedroom, listening to Rowan scream, feeling more helpless than he'd ever felt in his life. Jim and Henry sat with him, offering whiskey he couldn't drink and reassurances he couldn't believe. Women do this every day, Henry said. She'll be fine. You don't know that. I know she's the toughest woman in Wyoming. If anyone can do this, it's her. The labor lasted 8 hours. 8 hours of Elias imagining every terrible outcome, remembering Caroline, remembering the baby that never got to take a breath. Then finally, miraculously, he heard it, a baby crying. The midwife opened the door, smiling. You have a daughter. Both mother and baby are healthy. You can come in now. Elias walked into that room on shaking legs and found Rowan propped up in bed, exhausted and sweating and holding a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets. Come meet your daughter, she said, tears streaming down her face. He crossed the room, sat on the edge of the bed, and looked down at the smallest person he'd ever seen. She had dark hair like Rowan, and a face red from crying and tiny fists that were already swinging at the air. She's perfect, he whispered. She's loud, Rowan said, laughing through tears. And stubborn, already trying to fight the world. What should we name her? Rowan was quiet for a moment, looking down at their daughter. Caroline, she said softly, after your first wife. And Sarah for her middle name, after my daughter. So they're both here with us. Both part of this new life we're building. Elias felt tears burn his eyes. Are you sure? I'm sure. They shaped who we are, who we became. It feels right to honor them. So Caroline Sarah Mercer came into the world on a frozen Wyoming night, and Elias Mercer discovered that his heart was big enough to hold more love than he'd ever imagined possible. The next 6 months passed in a blur of sleepless nights and endless diapers and the peculiar joy that comes from watching a tiny person learn to exist in the world. Rowan took to motherhood with the same fierce determination she brought to everything else. She nursed Caroline, sang to her, refused to let anyone make her feel like she was doing it wrong. When women in town gave unsolicited advice, she smiled and nodded and then did exactly what she thought was best. Elias was a disaster at first. He held Caroline like she might break, changed diapers with the skill of a man defusing a bomb. But slowly, with Rowan's patient guidance and the baby's remarkable durability, he figured it out. One night, walking Caroline around the house at 3 a.m, while she screamed for reasons only she understood, Elias realized something. He was happy. Not the desperate, clinging happiness of someone afraid to lose what they have, but the deep, settled happiness of someone who knows they're exactly where they're supposed to be. Spring came again, and with it, changes neither of them expected. Victor Crow showed up at the ranch on a warm April morning, sober and alone. Elias saw him coming up the drive and felt his whole body tense. He walked out to meet him, ready for a fight. But Victor just stood there, hat in hands, looking older and more tired than Elias had ever seen him. "I'm not here to cause trouble," he said. "Then why are you here?" "To apologize, and to sell." Elias frowned. "Sell what?" "My ranch, all of it. I'm leaving Coldwater Falls, going back east. There's nothing for me here anymore." "What happened?" Victor was quiet for a long moment. "I spent the last year trying to destroy you because I was jealous. You had something I couldn't buy, someone who loved you despite your flaws, someone who chose you, and I couldn't stand it, so I tried to break you, tried to prove that what you had wasn't real." "Why?" "Because if it wasn't real, then maybe I hadn't wasted my whole life chasing money instead of meaning." He looked at Elias with hollow eyes. "But I was wrong. What you and Rowan have, it's real. And I'm tired of being the villain in someone else's love story." Elias didn't know what to say. "I'm sorry," Victor continued, "for everything, the poisoned cattle, the burned barn, all of it. I know sorry doesn't fix anything, but I'm saying it anyway." "Why now?" "Because last month I got a letter from my daughter. Daughter I haven't seen in 15 years because I was too busy building an empire to be a father. She wrote to tell me her mother died, that she'd asked about me at the end, wondered if I ever thought about them. And I realized," his voice cracked, "I realized I'd won everything and lost what mattered." Rowan appeared in the doorway, Caroline in her arms. Victor looked at her, at the baby, and something in his expression broke. "You were right about me, Mrs. Mercer. I am pathetic, but I'm trying to be better, for what it's worth." He put his hat back on, tipped it once, and walked away. Elias stood there watching him go, feeling a strange mix of anger and pity. "Do you believe him?" Rowan asked, coming to stand beside him. "I don't know, but I think he believes himself, and maybe that's enough." They never saw Victor Crow again. His ranch sold to a younger family from Kansas. The town slowly forgot about him, the way towns forget about people who leave and never come back. But Elias remembered that conversation, remembered the hollow look in Victor's eyes. It reminded him that winning isn't the same as having something worth keeping. And he was grateful, deeply, profoundly grateful, that he'd learned that lesson before it was too late. Summer brought prosperity to Mercer Ranch. The cattle were thriving. The books were finally in the black, and Caroline was growing into a loud, stubborn, absolutely perfect 6-month-old who had both her parents wrapped around her tiny finger. One evening, sitting on the porch while Caroline slept inside, Rowan turned to Elias. "Do you ever regret it, marrying me, all the trouble it caused?" "Never, not for a second. Even when we almost lost everything, especially then. Because that's when I learned what everything actually meant. Not the ranch, not the money. You, Caroline. This life we built from nothing." Rowan leaned against him. "I used to think my scars defined me, that they were the most important thing about who I was. But they're not. They're just something that happened. The important thing is what I did after, who I became." "You became extraordinary." "No, I became myself again. Just A different version, a stronger version. She looked up at him. You helped me find that. Helped me remember I was more than just someone's rejected wife or pitied stranger. You did the same for me. Made me remember I was more than Caroline's widower or a failed rancher. You made me want to be better. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun paint the Wyoming sky in shades of orange and pink. Do you think we'll ever stop feeling like we barely survived? Rowan asked. I don't know. Maybe survival is just what love looks like when you're building something real, messy and hard, and nothing like the stories say it should be. I can live with that. Me too. Inside, Caroline started crying, and they both stood to tend to her. But before they went in, Rowan stopped Elias. Thank you. For what? For choosing me. For fighting for us. For proving that sometimes the woman nobody wanted is exactly the woman someone needed. Elias pulled her close and kissed her, tasting salt from tears he couldn't tell were his or hers. I didn't choose you because nobody else wanted you. I chose you because I couldn't imagine wanting anyone else. They went inside together, and as Elias picked up his crying daughter, as Rowan stood beside him laughing at the faces Caroline was making, he felt something he'd thought he'd lost forever. Peace, not the absence of struggle, not the end of hardship, but the deep certainty that whatever came next, they'd face it together. The years that followed weren't easy. There were droughts that tested the ranch, winters that tested their endurance, moments when money got tight and tempers got short, and they had to remember why they were fighting so hard. But they made it, together. Caroline grew into a wild-haired, fierce-eyed girl who could ride a horse before she could properly walk. They had another baby 3 years later, a boy they named Samuel, after Rowan's father. The ranch expanded, the town grew, and slowly, almost without noticing, Elias and Rowan Mercer became the kind of couple people pointed to when they wanted to prove that love could survive anything. But they knew better. Love didn't survive on its own. It survived because two people decided every single day that what they were building together was worth the cost, worth the work, worth showing up for even when it would be easier to walk away. One night, 10 years after Rowan first stepped off that stagecoach, Elias found her standing in the yard, looking up at the stars. Can't sleep? He asked, coming to stand beside her. Just thinking. About what? About that first day. When I lifted my veil and saw the look on your face, I was so sure you'd send me back, so sure I'd finally found a place I might belong and it was going to reject me like everywhere else. But I didn't. No, you didn't. You said welcome home and changed my entire life. Elias took her hand. Do you regret it? Everything we went through? Rowan thought about it, really thought about it. The poisoned cattle, the burned barn, the whispers and stares, Victor's cruelty, the moment she'd wanted to give up, the pain and fear and exhaustion. Then she thought about the other things, the way Elias looked at her like she was the sun, the sound of her children laughing, the ranch they'd saved together, the life they'd built from wreckage and determination. No, she said finally. I don't regret any of it because all of it, every terrible, beautiful moment, led to this, to us, to the family we made, to becoming someone I'm proud to be. Do you ever miss who you were before? Before the fire? Sometimes, but honestly, I think I like who I am now better. She's harder, stronger. She doesn't apologize for taking up space. She knows what she's worth. Elias pulled her close, resting his chin on top of her head. You know what I learned from all this? What? That the things worth having are never the things that come easy. That real love isn't finding someone perfect. It's finding someone perfectly imperfect and choosing them anyway. Every day, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard, Rowan added. Especially then. They stood there under the Wyoming stars, two people who'd been broken and had somehow managed to heal together, and Elias felt grateful for every choice that had led them to this moment. Inside, one of the children called out, probably Samuel having another nightmare. Rowan started to go, but Elias stopped her. I'll get him. You stay out here. Enjoy the quiet. You sure? I'm sure. He kissed her forehead. I love you, Rowan Mercer. Just thought you should know. She smiled, that fierce, beautiful smile that still made his heart skip. I love you too. Now go take care of our son before he wakes his sister. Elias walked back toward the house, And just before he went inside, he turned to look at Rowan one more time. She was still standing there in the moonlight, scars and all, looking like the strongest thing he'd ever seen. And he realized that this ordinary moment in an ordinary life built from extraordinary determination, was exactly what happiness looked like. Not perfect, not easy, but real. And worth every single fight it took to get here.